would like to introduce Amy Campa, current second grade teacher, but while she's been at Indian Hill, she's also been a fourth and a fifth grade teacher. Actually, this is her 17th year with us as a school district, and overall she has been an elementary teacher for 26 years. Now, one of the reasons that I love every time I can talk to Amy Campa is her perspective. So not only is she familiar with multiple grade levels and multiple schools, she also brings the perspective of a community member and a parent of two very successful students who graduated from Indian Hill High School. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
We're so happy to have you here. And let's back up a little bit and talk about the strategic plan, which we affectionately like to call the IH Promise. And there are three themes associated with that: learners as doers, learners as individuals, and learners as a whole child. When we also think about those themes, there are some initiatives that are involved with that. And one of those initiatives is STEM. And we know that STEM is a lot more than the acronym of science, technology, engineering, and math. It's really about the way that we give students opportunities to think and to interact with the content and their own learning. So it makes sense that we actually back up for just a minute and celebrate, because the primary school is the only school in the state of Ohio to be designated as a STEM school. Yay! That's right, we should clap for that. It's a big deal. And I know that you were really involved with the process of thinking about STEM and what does that look like for our youngest of learners. So part of that is really thinking about this strategy called project-based learning.
Yes.
And you, as well as lots of teachers at the primary school, have spent significant time studying project-based learning and really thinking about what does that look like for 6, 7, and 8-year-olds. So why don't we start with just giving us a definition. What is project-based learning?
So project-based learning is the educational philosophy, the premise that students learn essentially by doing. They're posed a driving question, and the driving question is what leads the learning. That's the path. The idea is that the students are going to be trying to answer that driving question. Sometimes the driving question can be determined by the student, and sometimes the driving question can be determined by the teacher. It just all depends upon what you want the students to get out of the project as the teacher. When you start a project, the driving question is always at the forefront. And part of project-based learning is sharing an opportunity to share your learning with the public. Now, the public can be the other students in your class, the other students in your grade level, students in your school. It can be your parents, or it can also be an entire community. The reasoning for that public product is that it gives students a purpose. They understand that they're learning to share what they know with the people around them.
I've had really the pleasure of seeing it in action so many times. And I know that elementary is also really spending a lot of time thinking about this. And one of the things that I think is so fascinating is that when I go into your classroom, I sometimes can't tell if the original premise behind it was English or science or social studies. It feels like it's very interdisciplinary. So can you paint a picture of, like, when someone just walks into your classroom, what might they see?
You might see a lot of things. And you know, as a veteran teacher, someone who was trained in the traditional ways of teaching children, project-based learning really opened my eyes to the value of letting students lead. During a project, you might see a small group of students working on the floor creating something. You might see a student doing some research on the computer. You might see students building or playing a game. Lots of things happen during a project, and again, the premise is trying to figure out a way to answer that driving question. And because our students come to us with all different strengths and all different kinds of background knowledge, what they might need to answer that question at any given time, where they're at on the path, could be different. So there are lots of different things happening in a project-based classroom. Some of it might be that traditional, I'm going to give a direct instruction on what we're learning, and sometimes it might be rotation, where kids are working at different things that we're trying to get accomplished in order to reach our goal.
And I think the thing that I find so masterful when I'm visiting your classroom is that students are really allowed to have personal interest and personal preferences and how they want to think about the learning and how they want to manipulate or play with the learning. And at the same time, you are constantly making sure that they are meeting the academic goals that they need to as a second grader. So when we think about second grade as an example, one of the things that happens is there's a pretty significant growth rate in their writing ability. So you think about, like in kindergarten, sometimes they're writing with drawing pictures or a few words. Really, by the time they're leaving second grade, they're writing in paragraphs. It's really incredible. And so though students are allowed to be their own individual person, there's still this idea of every single individual in that class is moving towards this growth of what we expect out of second graders. It's really amazing to watch.
You know, that starting project-based learning was a little bit scary for me. I am a little bit type A, and just a little, and I like to have control over what's happening in my classroom. And you know, what was beautiful about being a part of a lab classroom and project-based learning at the primary school is that I was given the freedom to fail, like to try it out and see what happens. And being given that permission really let me let go of some of that type A.
Yeah.
And when you talk about meeting students where they're at, project-based learning is a perfect model for that. The amount of growth that I saw from my students last year, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, across all learners, was something that I had not seen before.
Wow.
And it wasn't, you know, because of they were getting enrichment or they were getting intervention. It was because I believe all of those things, of course, help, but I believe it's because they saw themselves as a community of learners, and they knew that some of us are good at one thing, some of us might be good at another, but when we work together, we can accomplish all of the goals that we want to or we need to. They really learned from each other because of the collaboration, the communication, the feedback that they were able to give each other through each project, and that the project structure allowed me to give to them as we worked. I think that it really helped them to grow more than I have ever seen.
I have so many things I want to say right now. So I want to start by just talking about you just for a minute. I know this will be slightly uncomfortable, but it's going to be okay in the end.
I can feel my chest getting warm.
Now, I just want to say, I think, Amy, you are such a representative of what makes this school district so special, and the fact that after 26 years of teaching, it would be very easy for you to say, like, I know I'm really good at what I do, and I'm not going to learn a new strategy because I know I can get students where I need to be. But you're like, I'm going to try something that's really uncomfortable for me because I believe this could be of benefit of the students. And that is what the teachers like at Indian Hill are like.
Yes.
They're willing to continue to grow, even with 26 years of very successful teaching, on your part, to say, like, I'm going to do this, even though it's a little scary, and it certainly is more work to try something new, but in the end, and the testimonial of saying, I saw more growth for my students last year, and we just have to add the note, we're still a little bit post-COVID in the world. And so to be able to say, like, I saw the most growth, that was like shocking to me, is such a testimonial of what happens when we allow students to have those type of authentic, personalized experiences.
And you know, the growth wasn't contained to just academic.
Yes, yes.
While that is super, super important, the growth that they made socially,
Yes.
emotionally, being able to engage with each other, being able to problem solve,
Yes.
all of those things are components of what happens during a project. They have to learn to
Yes.
work things out.
Yes. So I can't state enough how important I think this is. We've been doing a considerable amount of study of thinking about how do we be as future thinking as possible for our students, and not think about the end of the journey for our Indian Hill students is when they graduate. It's not even when they go off into their choice of a post-secondary option, whether that be employment, military, or the university setting, but how do we set them up so that they have such a strong foundation that they're thriving in those settings, and then able to think about what is the impact Indian Hill Schools is having on students 10 years after they graduate from high school. And one of the things we're thinking about really consistently is that we're hearing from through businesses and industry, the idea of we don't expect our newest employees to know everything when they walk in the door. We will teach them what they need to know. But here's what we do need. And this is really across to all industries. We need to see leadership. We need to see cognitive flexibility. We need to see self-management. We need to see critical and creative thinking. That's what we're hearing. And we're also seeing that through some of the major publications that come out about employment. When we think about leadership and we think about leadership training, I think leadership is critical for us as a school district. I believe strongly these students will be the leaders of the community, the country, the world when they leave us. That's how special our students are. When we think about leadership training, there is some curriculum that comes into play that we want to enact for our students K through 12, but it also has to be embedded in what they do on a daily basis. This is what leadership experience and training and development looks like when you're talking about an 8-year-old.
Yes, because within the classroom, they are working on those skills that help them to become leaders.
Right.
They're working on critical thinking. They're working on collaboration. They are learning how to communicate both when they agree with what someone is saying and when they disagree. And they're figuring out how to navigate different situations where sometimes they might not feel comfortable.
Right.
And they're growing. And really, to watch a group of 7 and 8-year-olds approach a task and not agree, and to sit back and listen to the conversation about how they are able to speak what they feel and then come to an agreement is fascinating.
Yeah.
Like the first time I stepped back and kind of sent my students off to work and had the experience of just listening, I was like, wow.
Right.
They're doing it. They really do understand what it means to use those 21st century skills.
And what happens when our students have those experiences and they change in complexity as they get older and older really does set them up for the most success possible later in life.
And it provides them with authentic opportunities to practice. Whereas for me, all of those things kind of were in a little pot that I directly instructed. Like, oh, let's do a question and answer card game and talk about how would you solve this problem, or what if someone says this, how would you, and problem-based learning provides the opportunity in a real world situation that's authentic to them, that they care about, and it's not set up for them.
Right. So speaking of real world, already, though this is relatively new in your classroom and at the primary school, there's already been some really incredible results of real world learning. And I'm thinking about both the playground and the nature preserve. So will you tell us about that?
So the playground project was something that the entire school participated in, and each classroom was given the task or the problem to identify and create a playground that would be all-inclusive, that would help to include more of our student population. And we researched, we looked at different types of playground equipment, students read about, other playgrounds and visited other playgrounds, and each classroom created their own model. And then MSA then took all of those ideas and incorporated what they could into our current playground, which if you haven't visited the new primary school playground, it's pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. Could there be a better, joyous moment than when the students got to play on the playground for the first time that they designed? I was so glad I could be there to witness that moment. It was really incredible.
It was fun, and as adults, some of the equipment we were like, ugh.
Yeah.
But they love it, and they're able to maneuver it, and they do really well.
Yeah.
In regards to the
Nature Preserve,
we did a project with 2 first-grade classrooms and created a bird watching station outside of my classroom and Mickey Eubanks' classroom. And our students researched a wide variety of Ohio animals and then chose to focus on birds because that's the animal that we see the most of, with the woods being right outside our classroom. And they were able to identify, the kinds of birds that we see, the kind of food and habitats that would be most beneficial for them. And they created outdoor seatings for students to come and enjoy the space. And we applied through the National Wildlife Foundation and were able to be certified as a national schoolyard habitat.
That is so incredible, all the way around incredible. And talk about authentic audience and what a lesson for the students about the quality of work that we do and how it can pay off in the future. For them to be able to say, we did this, we were able to get this designation. Really an incredible experience. I think sometimes when we think about a shift in what happens in a classroom, sometimes for people it can seem confusing about why does it look different than it's looked in the past. And we've had some great conversation about it. Is there any last words that you have from your perspective as a veteran and very successful teacher about why you think this is really important for us to think about as a K through 12 district? Why is project-based learning important?
Oh, that's a big question. For me personally, I think it's important because it's authentic.
Yeah.
It keeps the students engaged. We have, as educators, a lot of things that keep students engaged outside of the classroom. Electronics and social media and all of those things, that can be a lot to compete with, even when they're at school. Video games. And I think project-based learning provides them with something authentic, that's engaging, that causes them to think and that they care about, to keep them engaged in their learning.
Right. I think a couple other thoughts that I had when you were saying that. One is, we're in this stage of infancy regarding artificial intelligence. And as educators, we're attending seminars and webinars and everything to try to understand what it means and stay a little bit ahead of it. And people have said it will be more transformative than the smartphone. And I recently went to a webinar on it, and one of the people speaking said it'll actually be more transformative than electricity. And I was like, okay,
wow,
I really need to wrap my head around this like super fast. I think one of the things is that whether you're talking about like our current platform to when we say to Google something, or even in the future when we think about artificial intelligence and its generative capability, the work that you do in project-based learning can't be Googled. It's work that's way too complex in critical thinking, and it doesn't have a set path, that there's no way to come up with the answer using any of those platforms. Those platforms can help develop knowledge around it, but I love that we have something that still creates the deepest level of thinking, and that technology still remains the tool, not the answer.
And I think, you can use Google, you can use AI to help you come up with ideas for a project, but I think the bottom line is why those things won't ever replace the teacher is because of the relationship that you have.
Oh, of course.
The student-teacher relationship.
Of course.
And knowing your students and who they are and the types of learners they are helps me as a teacher to provide what they need for the project. Whereas if I just Googled an idea or I used artificial intelligence to, I mean, really, you can type in, give me a unit for second graders on blah, 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 and it will spit one out.
Right.
But although I can use that as a framework or a guide, AI doesn't know my students like I know my students. And it can give me what they need. If that makes sense?
Total sense. No amount of artificial intelligence will ever replace the relationship that teachers have with students. And I will say, Amy, like the relationship you cultivate with your students is second to none. It really is a model for what it can feel like in a classroom. And I have had such the honor of watching you in action for so many years now, not only as a teacher, but as a mom. I also was fortunate enough to have Abby and Will, your children, when I was a principal, and I got to see all of the benefits within them of you as a mom. As a leader, I have had a chance to see you. You have served on countless number of teacher committees. You are a leader within our Brave Leadership Team, our teacher organization of leaders. You are a past president of the Educator Professional Organization, or what we call EPO as a district. And when we think about all the things that make Indian Hill special, I will consistently say, coming here, you work with our students and you just realize there's something very special about our student population. And our parents could not be more supportive. And the final piece of that is really what the teachers bring into the classroom every day. And I can say that working with you has made me a better educator all the way around, Amy. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your talents with us in the classroom every day and sharing our talents here within Masterclass.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here with us as well.